Welcome back to Weekend Review on Morning Express, and a quick reintroduction of the guests that we have this morning. We have Susan Mangeni, Steve Ogolla, and Paul Kirago. Before we took the break, I stopped Paul Kirago, who wanted to weigh in. But as we weigh in, Paul, I think we have a tendency of concentrating a lot on what has happened. We are reactive rather than proactive, and would like to talk solutions. We keep almost going through what has happened, like we cannot, project and see what's happening. So let's look at solutions. What do we need as a solution in this country?
Firstly, let me address the issue of electoral justice. That is a very amorphous term. When you say we need electoral justice, what is electoral justice? Is it doing another election? Is it overhauling our laws? Is it amending certain laws? If you talk about electoral justice, point out where you feel the law is occasioning electoral injustice, so that those sections of the law will be taken through the appropriate channels, Parliament, and they will be amended.
All right, and allow me to pause you there, because if we use the narrative of the politician, electoral justice will keep changing. But if we keep it very simple, you and I know it's free, credible, verifiable elections. That's basically what we're talking about when we talk about electoral reforms.
My problem with that, with using other extra-constitutional means to achieve electoral justice, is that we'll form a precedent where we have institutions that are there to make the law. We have the judiciary to interpret the law. We have the executive, it has its functions. So when the executive takes over the role, say for instance the president sits down with the opposition leader, they decide to amend the law 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll not have a parliament that can independently debate a law, pass a law for implementation by the executive. So in a democracy, we'll be very dishonest if we were to imagine that you can have at a democracy, you can have an election that does not produce a winner and a loser. If all of them are winners at the end of the day, then there is no democracy.
All right, so Kirago, do you agree that we have a problem when it comes to our elections in this country?
Those are challenges that are everywhere.
But are they a problem?
We have progressed. If you look at where we were in 1997, 2003, 2007, 2013, 2017, I mean, everyone can see...
As much as there has been progress, yes, then we need to progress a bit more. So my question is, do you agree that we do have problems as we stand right now? And then if we do, what solutions should we be implementing?
The problems that we have, as I said, are challenges that you will experience in any system. What happens after every election or after every exercise? What does the IEBC do? They sit down, they review the whole election, they see where the challenges were, they make recommendations, they ask kindly assist us to, Parliament assist us to amend this law, would want it this way, would want it this way, because last time we had these challenges. But that is the electoral body that sees here we have a problem. Even the political parties will say, hey, here we experience a problem, so let it be addressed. But let us not go to the top, look for the president to sit down with the opposition leader and say, let us have this kind of laws for it to govern the elections.
Susan, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know, but my friend Kirago, I still, he assumed all is well. Everything is well, Parliament can function. He is not seeing the political questions that are rising. The question here, and I repeat, is the legitimacy. There is no way you'll achieve that legitimacy by assuming that now I have the authority. Look at how even the outlook of Parliament, the current Parliament, the outlook, tyrant of number. And we saw it even in the last Parliament. You saw what happened. Even during the, like now the vetting of CSs right now. I mean, if we ask Kenyan, we'll be like, anyway, is there anything good that is likely to come from there? Because of what we experienced before. I mean, people will say, this is the president decision, so we have to support it. And we have seen this. You've seen MPs, Keters, and the like, you know. Their fellow MPs will elect them to committees because of the ability. And what happens? The president had said, I don't know, Jubilee's agenda or what. So what I'm trying to say, you cannot just slip down and assume all is well. All is not well, and they're not going to resolve these political issues with legal solutions. And we've also seen that Jubilee is also unable to uphold to the legal route.
Where does that leave us when we say that we cannot solve our issues legally? Because again, the courts and the legal system is literally there for when we have problems. Because you and I can disagree, we can decide to fight, but at the end of the day, it is the court that would come and say, no, you separate from the fight, and this is what the legal stand is.
But you've seen it. We've seen in this week. That's why I started by saying what I can pick from this week that is just ending is the state of lawlessness. And you see, how is it coming about? It's because you're not even respecting the courts. It's like you can be someone there and you don't go. What do you expect that a poor person down there? Will that person go to court? Will that person obey the court order when the top cannot obey that? So what you're saying is now becoming beyond the legal system. I think people have to accept. And you see, once the top there shows that they cannot abide with the rule of law, and people, some section of Kenyans, when they see they have numbers, they will they look for other alternative ways of governing themselves. And that's why we are likely to have even a bigger crisis. So for me, I think these are political questions. Like Ogola said, you cannot run away from it. And President Kenyatta should accept that we have a political crisis. Even though right now he has authority, he's able to formulate the agenda. Why are you saying bring the agenda? He has talked about, if it's agenda about how we create employment, fine, I'm willing to discuss. But how do you create employment in an unconducive environment?
All right.
Just a quick reaction just before you go there. 2 words. She talked about the numbers in parliament. Maybe we can ponder on this as we go along. Is it a problem now that the government has more numbers in parliament, and it was not a problem in 2007 when the opposition had more numbers? So I think the composition of the parliament, that is democracy. It is a manifestation of democracy. There's nothing we can do about it.
But the system in 2007 was totally different. That was a grand kind of coalition government, and you see how they operated.
Either way, the composition of parliament depends on how people elect their leaders. So if one side gets more numbers than the other, I mean,
that's democracy. That's democracy.
So let us not be participating in a democratic process. Then after the outcome, we sit down and say, let us mutilate what the people decided. And it will be so wrong for people who have given the president mandate to govern the country when they hear that, hey, he negotiated with the other side, and they came up with a solution that accommodates everyone.
And that is assuming that
what we need to do going forward. Kenya must re-establish its reputation as a rule of law country. That we must. Otherwise, we just have to say that there's a total breakdown of the rule of law, there's lawlessness, there's anarchy. We must re-establish our reputation as a rule of law country. The government should not compete with the political opposition in manipulating or breaking the law. Number 2, we should desist or maybe refrain from this ethnic sloganeering. Our government, we won, you lost. Election, by the way, is supposed to be more inclusive. If you look at the cardinal principles of an electoral democracy, number 1 is inclusiveness.
Yes.
It's a sense of pride that you're going to the ballot. You know, but when you go to the ballot, setting you against him, it leaves a deeply divided society. We need to reframe the idea of an election. Transparency, accountability, inclusiveness. These are inextricable requirements of an electoral process. Number 3, Kenyans, redeem yourselves from this ethnic jingoism. You are excessively ethnic. You are unable to rise above the fray. You're unable to read the Constitution objectively and dispassionately and distinguish what the politicians are telling. Let me tell you, Mr. Gitonga, this ethnic hatred you see in this country benefits the political elite more than it can ever benefit the poor masses.
Actually, they never benefit
who are always organized around it. You know.
But Steve, how do Kenyans rise above that, especially when the narrative has always been us?
Now we are doing this
as against them.
Professor Douglas C. North, a renowned electoral law expert, has written widely on these issues, says in his book, Violence and the Social Order, what the political lenses show is different from what you, ordinary Mwananchi, see. The political lenses and the political elite are organized along interest formation. They are critical interest formation. It's about accumulation of power, ascendancy to critical offices for resource mobilization, resource management. I have said it could be that the struggle in Kenya for political competition is not actually a struggle for service delivery, but a struggle for co-option into the club of resource managers. You sit there thinking that I have my man there. Once he's there, they'll cut deals and they'll cut corners that will exclude you. As a lawyer, my office is full of files from all sorts of people. I have never wanted to say, I can't take this file, because I know when I sit in that office, I have opened my office to receive briefs. But how come when I step out of that office and I retreat to my private space, I suddenly become excessively ethnic? And I think Kenyans must liberate yourselves. If you expect to be liberated by politicians, you will ruin your lives, you will ruin this country. Liberate yourself. Now, electoral process is a cycle that begins with the end of the last election. And that's where we should be going. That's what I'm saying. If anybody has ideas on how to improve the process, he shouldn't be excluded, or his voice should not be delegitimized, whether it's Steve Ogola, whether it's another Mwananchi wa kawaida, whether it's Raila Odinga. Whatever issue you have that can improve the electoral management process, bring it on.
It needs to be heard.
What I've said that cannot be open to discussion, because as a rule of law question only, having said that the Supreme Court determined the electoral process with finality, let's make peace with that. And then let us know, when you look at election management comparatively, Kenya is not the only country that conducts elections. The process universally or worldwide, once you've closed this electoral process, you begin by an IBC releasing an election report. The election report will trigger debate. Post-election report will trigger debate and identification of key areas for improvement. Then you go to an election period. Election period, which will probably cover between the first 1 year and the last 2 years, the election. You look at the laws. How do we do institutional strengthening? How do you deal with external manipulation of IBC? How do we revise the laws? How do you deal with political indecency and indiscipline? Let's have a conversation about peace. The last 24 months to the election, we shouldn't be replacing IBC. Can we get that commitment now that come 2020, we will not be angling to replace the IBC?
Okay.
This IBC came into force 9 months the election.
Right.
How can you have a detailed understanding of a sophisticated election management process? How? 9 months the election.
All right.
This is the conversation.
We are running out of time. Susan, I need your closing comments on the way forward and possibly what we should project and expect our leaders to give us in the coming times to come.
For me, I think it's imperative that our leaders, especially the top leadership, that one I mean the opposition and also the government, they have to underscore the fact that we have a political crisis in this country, and if it continues like this, where the opposition can be able to set an agenda the way they are setting, and the government now will remain to react, this is going to be dangerous. And unfortunately for the President Uhuru Kenyatta will not be able to achieve his big four. But like I said, I've added him another agenda, which is unity, peace and unity. So for me, I would say dialogue is a must.
All right, your closing comments, Kirago?
I would like to ask Kenyans to respect the rule of law.
Starting with our leaders, perhaps?
Yes, court orders must be obeyed. There is no exception to that. Because one day you will disrespect a court order, then you get away with it. The next day, it is your opponent who will disobey a court order to your detriment. So let us make that non-negotiable. We respect court orders. But also, one thing, let us also respect institutions. Let us not always treat any government action as being done in bad faith. Let us first look at it, and then we interrogate it. Then we see whether it was actually justified. And I'm making reference to the case of Miguna Miguna. As my learned friend Mr. Ogola said, prima facie, it appears from what we've seen, he may probably not have been a Kenyan. But when those actions took place, everyone was up in arms. Hey, you are deporting a Kenyan, you are deporting a Kenyan. But when facts started to stream in, now people started interrogating and saying, hey, wait a minute, probably the government was right. So let us not always treat every government action as being done in bad faith.
Your closing comments, Steve. That's almost another debate starting there, but your closing comments.
Quickly, Kenyans should innovate within their challenges, find solutions without necessarily relying on external assistance. Our destiny and our greatness will depend on our ability to problem solve internally. That, for me, is what I would say.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Susan, Mangeni, Paul, Kirago, and Steve Ogola on the week's review. And I know your comments have been coming in fast and furious, but I'll read them as we continue with the show. But for now, we're going to take a short break. And at this point, we release KTN Home for Life and Style to begin. But on KTN News, we are going to be talking about a governance summit that is coming up. And good governance for good citizenship is definitely a subject that we all need to weigh in on, because that's probably what is keeping us where we are today. So do stay with us right here on Morning Express. For now,